Tax is moving up to challenge Performer for the lead. Mubermarge is on the extreme outside. 3/4 went in 1:12-1 as the field comes into the stretch. It's Performer and Tax, and the two of them are right together as they come down for the 8th pole. It's Tax on the outside, and it's Performer on the inside, and a great duel here through the stretch. Performer and Tax. Performer has the lead. Tax on the outside, and it's a big performance from Performer to win the Discovery. Tax was second. Big break. Back to Grumps, Little Tots, and NYC.
All right, so welcome back to Racing Rundown. We got a big weekend of racing coming up this weekend across the country, be it at Belmont Park or be it at Santa Anita. Some really fun races this weekend. Normally, June 6th, as you know, would have been the weekend of the Belmont Stakes. And I have said numerous times, and I'll say it once again, the Belmont Stakes card at NYRA is the best non-Breeders' Cup card in the country. And a lot of times the Belmont Stakes isn't even the best race on that particular Belmont card. We do retain some of the punch that this weekend normally would have had. It's still going to be a very good weekend, even though we don't have the Belmont Stakes or all the undercards that come on that. We got a nice race to talk about on this one, the Carter Handicap, 7 furlongs, and this, different from what it normally is. Normally this is a Grade 1 Aqueduct's biggest race run on the Wood Memorial card normally, but obviously with the situation with the coronavirus, Aqueduct has not been able to finish its meet, and so this race is being picked up by Belmont Park and being run at Belmont Park with a 7 furlong distance retained. Purse cut a little bit, but it does pick up a Breeders' Cup tag. So winning, you're in for the Breeders' Cup. Winning horse gets automatic entry into the 2020 Breeders' Cup Sprint at Keeneland this year. Taking a look at the field before we go individually through, we're not going to talk about every single horse in this race, but we're going to hit on a bunch of them. Before we go into that, I just want to go through quickly the field. Number 1 is Firenze A Fire, 2 is Performer, 3 is Still Having Fun, 4 is Nitrous, 5 is Network Effect, 6 is Midnight Charlie, 7 is American Anthem, 8 is Bon Raison, 9 is Majestic Dunhill, 10 is Mind Control, and 11 is Vakoma. So obviously, if you've listened to the show a lot and paid attention to some of the horses that we talk about, have talked about with a lot of enthusiasm, there's a couple horses in here that both myself and my co-host Eric really, really like, and we've been really high on these two horses throughout the latter part of last year and going into this year. Those, of course, being the 2 Performer and the 10 Mind Control. So those are obviously the big horses that we're both excited to see, but there's a ton of other horses in this race as well. And the first one I want to get to is actually the horse that drew the outside, number 11, Vakoma. You might remember him last year from winning the Bluegrass at Keeneland, also running 12th in the Kentucky Derby. Common theme, just something to say about the Kentucky Derby in general. Common theme last year is a lot of good horses are going to come out of that Kentucky Derby, already have and are still going to end up coming out that didn't run necessarily where you would have expected them for a variety of reasons. And Vakoma's another one of those horses that, for whatever reason, Kentucky Derby wasn't really the best race for him at the time. Kind of the same case with By My Standards, at least I think. Now, Vakoma, I think, is a little bit of a different running style than By My Standards, but kind of the same idea with them. And, you saw that with this horse, because he ran a very good third in the Fountain of Youth Stakes at Gulfstream back in March of 2019. And then sandwiched between the Kentucky Derby was he won the Bluegrass at Keeneland, and then most recently, last time out at Gulfstream, he won the Sir Shackleton, which that was really good to see him come back in, and he showed that he wasn't that 12th place effort in the Kentucky Derby. And, that's what you see a lot with the Kentucky Derby is horses run to the level where you wouldn't necessarily expect that horse to run, and because it's the Kentucky Derby, they don't necessarily get the best trip or whatever. The thing with Vakoma that I would say about him is he's probably going to find himself pretty close to the lead. He was close to the lead in the Kentucky Derby, but he wasn't anywhere close to being at the top 2 or 3 horses. That could change in this race today. He wasn't on the lead front running in the Sir Shackleton last start out at Gulfstream, but this is a race that doesn't have much speed in it, and he's the type of horse that does like to sit pretty close, isn't up there gunning it if it's a speed duel, but he does sit pretty close. And in a race like this with a lot of late speed, or with a lot of late closers, that could definitely be the type that he's definitely the type of horse that you would see up on the front end. So don't rule out the possibility of seeing Vakoma on the front end. I'm not going to write him off by just the fact that he's going to end up on the front end. But that is one thing to consider, that he could end up right on the front, given the fact that there's not really much speed in this race. So he's a play. I would definitely consider him. I'm not going to pick him. I like other horses in this race more than I would like him, but I have respect for him, and I would not be surprised to see him run a very, very nice effort here. I want to cross completely back across the starting gate for the next horse that we're going to talk about. This is the 5-year-old Firenze A Fire, who was formerly in the Jason Service barn and has since, with the situation that's happened with him, has since been transferred to Kelly Breen's barn. And, obviously, our hope would be for the horse that everything is right with him and he doesn't have any ill effects coming out of the Jason Service barn. So that would be the one thing, if you're that type of person, and it's a point worth making if you're the cynical type that, this is a horse coming out of Jason Service's barn and we know what's been happening. So, I'm not the biggest fan of saying that, this horse doesn't have any kind of talent in him just because of the things that were in his system. But that is a conversation that does need to be had. So, I will say, I will mention that. Take that as it may be. He is on a 3-race win streak, and the other thing about him is he does love Belmont Park. So those are two things that you love to see. He's had a lot of success on the Naira tracks. He won the Champagne at Belmont in 2017 as a 2-year-old. He won the Dwyer at Belmont at 3, and then last year won the Run Happy at Belmont. So he's won at Belmont at 2, 3, and 4, and that's definitely what you would want to see from a horse like that runs really well at a track like Belmont Park. And he's also run, it is also worth mentioning, in some of the races that he hasn't won, he's run some really nice second place efforts and just really good races behind some really nice horses. Specifically, the one that comes to mind is the Vosburg last year when he ran second to Imperial Hint, almost beat him, ran too good to lose in that race. And last year he ran some really, really solid efforts. He was second in the Forgo behind Matoli, who was the champion sprinter last year, and a lot of people think should have won the Eclipse Award for champion older male. And then he was 5th in the Breeders' Cup Sprint, which was a very respectable effort for him. But, the question is there with Firenze A Fire is how much is the transition from Jason Service to Kelly Breen going to affect him? I'm going to give the horse an opportunity to run a race, and then I'll make my decision from there. But I can understand if you don't want to take a shot with him, with the questions that are hanging over this horse's head. The next horse that I want to go to in this race is the number 7 American Anthem. And this is a horse that's been all over the place over the course of his career. You probably remember him from as part of the Bob Baffert barn way back in 2017 in that 3-year-old crop that wasn't really the best. Looking at some of the races that he's won back when he was a 3-year-old, he was a very tough luck loser in the Sham Stakes, but wasn't that good in the Rebel or the Santa Anita Derby. But then they cut him back to sprint distances, and specifically, which is a reason why you could consider him. Looking at his most recent efforts, you wouldn't necessarily think you'd want to consider him. But the reason why I'm mentioning him here is because he won the Woody Stevens on the 6th of June 2017 on Belmont Stakes card. And the Woody Stevens, same conditions as this race. 7-furlong sprint race at Belmont Park. So the fact that he's won a race of that caliber over the Belmont circuit definitely does give me some encouragement. He has not run at Belmont since that Woody Stevens, so that would be another reason why I would consider him. He was 4th last time out in the Toboggan behind Mind Control and 2nd in the Stymie. So he has been all over the place. He hasn't won since Del Mar on the 20th of July last year in an optional claiming. He hasn't won a stakes race since June 23rd of 2018, which was the San Carlos. So, he has been all over the place, and, obviously he's switched trainers, no longer part of the Bob Baffert barn. So the verdict that I would say for American Anthem is, yes, he's been all over the place. Yes, he hasn't won a race since July of last year. He's on a 4-race losing streak. Has not won a stakes race since June of 2018. But I'm going to give him a shot here because he has won over the Belmont Surface before. And again, the fact that the race that he won, the Woody Stephens, is the same conditions as this race, gives me some encouragement. Not very much encouragement. I would definitely not use him in the top 3. But I would give him an outside chance to at least run a solid race here. The thing about him is also he has been running solid races. He hasn't run a quote-unquote bad race since the Bing Crosby at Del Mar on the 28th of July, 2018. And that was a 6th place effort. If you look at his past efforts, he hasn't been out of the top 4 since that Bing Crosby, including that optional claiming win at Del Mar and a 2nd place effort in the Stymie last time out and a couple of 4ths in grade 2 races. So, he's all over the place, but I'll give him an outside shot here. The next horse that I want to move on to is Nitrous. And this is a horse that both Eric and I were really high on going into the Count Fleet Handicap in Oaklawn. We thought that his last race had come at Kentucky Downs, which was a grass race. And I'm drawing a line through that race. This horse not a grass horse. We thought coming off of that, he was going to run a really nice race. He's run some bang-up races in the past, including running 2nd in both the Woody Stephens and the Amsterdam. The Woody Stephens behind Hawk Creek Hustle, and the Amsterdam behind Chancelot, who freaked that day. He had a poor trip in the Allen Jerkins, and that 5th place effort that he ran looks a lot worse on paper than it did. He was basically 2 lengths and some change back of what was a blanket finish on the front end. Mind Control obviously winning that race by a nose, and those 4 all up there. And, he was two and some change length back of that photo, that blanket finish right there. So, it looks a lot worse on paper than it did actually there. And, another example of that happening in the Count Fleet, he had a very, very bad trip. Was wide throughout, and it was an impossible situation for him to be able to pick up the amount of ground that he had to and be able to win that race, especially against a horse like Whitmore, who Whitmore at Oaklawn is a completely different horse than Whitmore at anywhere else. Nitrous has been a lot better than the race charts would show. Hasn't won since the Bachelor Stakes at Oaklawn last April in 2019, but he has run some really nice races in the past and been the victim of some really bad luck in the races where he didn't run terrible, but the number doesn't do him justice. Now, the issue with him this weekend is he is a very deep closer, as you've seen from the races that he's run in the past, and there is going to be absolutely zero speed. As we've touched on already, there's going to be zero speed in this race, and he's not going to be able to close into that. So, unless things change drastically and there's a complete pace meltdown, Nitrous, you can't go with him in this spot. Normally, I would say Nitrous is going to be one of those horses that you want to take a shot at a price that he would be overlooked. But in this spot, there's going to be zero speed on the front end, and he's going to be plodding on the back and is not going to be able to get anywhere once they get to the stretch. So a horse that I like, but unfortunately I can't take him in this spot because he is not going to have the setup that you would normally want to see from a horse like him. I want to briefly mention Midnight Charlie, a horse that has been tearing it up on the Pennsylvania circuit, running some really solid efforts. He had a 3-race win streak going back to late 2018 and early 2019 and has not finished out of the top 4 running down at Pennsylvania. He has 6 wins and 6 seconds in 15 career and 1/3. So 13 out of the 15 times he's run, he's been in the money. And the other 2 times he was 4th in a black type at Parks and then also optional claimer. Most recently he was 2nd in the Fabulous Strike Stakes, listed at Penn National. But, the question that you would have with this horse is he's been running some really nice races in Pennsylvania, but how is he going to transfer that to Belmont Park and running against a field like this? And I would say with him, he has won a lot of races, but it would be really hard for him he would have to step up and run the race of his life here. And with the caliber of horses that are running in this race, I just don't see that. But I did just want to mention him because he does look really nice on paper and has been really good down in Pennsylvania. I also want to get to Chad Brown's entry for this race. Network Effect, who has also run some nice races on the New York circuit. He won his maiden, broke his maiden at Saratoga on August 11th, 2018, and then ran second in a couple of races at Aqueduct for 2-year-olds, the Nashua and the Remsen. But in his biggest race to date, the Grade 1 Cigar Mile, he was a no-show. He ran 8th, not really impressive at all, but has come back from that. Did run second in an optional claiming at Gulfstream on Florida Derby Day, behind Wind of Change, and then also, most recently, last time out on the 2nd of May, won the Big Drama Stakes, listed at Gulfstream. So, what is also worth mentioning is this horse is trained by Chad Brown, ridden by Irad Ortiz, owned by Klarovich Stables, the same people from the Bricks and Mortar camp. So if you're a person who likes to play based off a trainer and jockey, doesn't really hurt to have the best trainer and the best jockey on a horse in a race, going into a race like this. So, if you're a person who likes to play jockeys and trainers, definitely this is the horse for you. But the big issue with him is, you look back to that Cigar Mile when he ran against horses of the caliber of Maximum Security and Spun to Run and did not step up at all. The question would be with him is he going to be able to step up? And I just don't think so. With the caliber of horses that are running in this race, I don't really see much coming from him. But Chad Brown, Irad Ortiz, definitely a reason to take this horse. And the final 2 horses that we're going to talk about are the 2 horses that, for me, have been pretty much impossible to separate. These are 2 of my favorite horses in training, those being Mind Control and Performer. I'm going to start with Mind Control first. This horse has been a really solid horse over the course of his career, especially at Belmont Park and on the Nitrous circuits. But, you look at this horse, and he's got the credentials. Grade 1 winner at 2, Grade 1 winner at 3. Very likely he's going to be a Grade 1 winner at 4. He's run some really solid races. I'll draw a line through the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. I don't really think he was ready for that race. And I don't think, number one, I also don't think he's a 2-turn horse. So that coupled with the fact that I don't really think he was 100% ready for that. But he's won the Hopeful. Anyone who has seen the history of that race, the Hopeful has produced some really solid sprinters of late, horses that can run at this 7 furlong distance, which I think Mind Control is best at the 7 furlong distance. Both of his Grade 1 wins have come at that. Most recently, the Hopeful Stakes produced the 2017 Alan Jerkins winner, Practical Joke, in addition to Mind Control. So, and also it is worth mentioning he is coming off of 3 consecutive wins. Going back to the Alan Jerkins, he has also won at Aqueduct the Toboggan and the Tom Fool, both Grade 3 races. There's just really not much about Mind Control that speaks to me that he isn't a really high caliber sprinter and that he doesn't want a race like this, or that he wouldn't run well in a race like this. Another race, the Woody Stevens, I'm going to draw a line through that. That wasn't the best setup for him as well. And, just looking at the caliber of work that he's had recently, a lot of stakes wins. Bayshore, he won the Bayshore. Also won the Jerome. Again, also mentioned the Alan Jerkins and the 2 stakes that he's won this year. So if it wasn't for the other horse in this race, I would 100% be going all in with Mind Control. But I just can't go in with this horse right here, because we're looking at another 3-year-old that's emerging, late bloomer from the Shug McGahee barn. He ran his first race all the way back in November of 2018. He ran 3rd in that. It wasn't really the best race, wasn't terrible, but for a horse of the caliber that I think, and myself and also Eric think, that is very, very good, could be one of the leaders of the older male division this year. You would not expect to see him run 3rd in his maiden, but since then, on the 29th of June, broke his maiden over this Belmont circuit. So that's definitely a very encouraging thing to see from him. He had a fabulous allowance win. I encourage anyone to go back and look at his allowance win at Saratoga. That was a great race. In addition, he also has come back to Belmont since that run at Saratoga and won an optional claiming race also. And then most recently, last start out, the race that kind of put this horse on the map was his win in the Grade 3 Discovery over Tax, who in and of himself is a very solid horse. I've neglected to mention the name, but I'm not going to leave his name out any longer. Of course, we're discussing Performer. He is a horse that both Eric and I have been really excited to see this horse come back ever since he won the Discovery. Both of us think that he's got a lot of bigger things in store for him. Even if he does win this race, we think he can go longer. He definitely does have the pedigree to do whatever. He's by Spicetown, so we know he can sprint, but he's also out of an AP Indy mare, so we know there's definitely some distance there. So, obviously, Shug McGaughey, he's going to do what's best for this horse, and, whatever Shug McGaughey decides to do with him, no one's going to disagree with, because Shug McGaughey, he's one of the best guys in the business. I'm going to take this horse all the way, as much as I do have a soft spot for Mind Control, and I would love to take him in here. I'm going to go all in with Performer here, and, just one other note on him from his last race in the Discovery, just adding to the fact that he can go any distance, he can go long, he can go short. That was a 1.125 mile race. This is going to be 7 furlongs. Don't really have much doubts in Performer at all. I'm just ready to see him be able to take the next big step. He's already a Grade 3 winner. This will go a long way to making him into a Grade 1 winner. And then from there, we'll see where he goes. We'll see if Shug wants to go short with him or go long. The Carter Handicap has been on the books for Shug McGaughey for probably ever since he won the Discovery. That was, if you remember back to the show that we did after the Discovery when we were talking about him, we thought he was going to go in a race like that. That was why he was on hold, and it's good to see him back. And, like I mentioned, I'm going to go all in with Performer. I'm going to go Mind Control second, and then I will go with Vakoma to stick around and pick up a nice third place effort for him in his first Grade 1 since the Kentucky Derby. So that's the Carter Handicap again this Saturday at Belmont. Really looking forward to this one. Really excited to see what we're going to get out of Mind Control and Performer this year. This has been Racing Rundown. This is Carter Handicap preview. We will see you for previews of the Santa Anita Derby in Oaks as well as the Hollywood Gold Cup, the newly renamed Hollywood Gold Cup. So appreciate you stopping by, and hopefully we'll see you again next time. Have a good one. Good luck this weekend.
They're coming to the top of the stretch, and Chancelot turns for home in front. Opening up a 2-length lead, Cole Paul tries to stick with him with a furlong to run. Chancelot set down for another 1/8 of a mile, a 2.5 length lead. Cole Paul, Rowayton, Mind Control, and Hog Creek Hustle on the outside. They're all coming. Chancelot's got it close to home. Mind Control, Hog Creek Hustle on the outside. They're coming to the line. Oh, it's very close. Did Chancelot hold on? Mind Control was there too. So too was Hog Creek Hustle in a dramatic finish in the Allen Jerkins.